Hello, my name is Evelyn Shimazu. I am an associate professor in university libraries here at Azusa Pacific University. I have served as a librarian here for 14 years and currently serve as an associate professor and curator of a special collection that tells the history of a group of mission-minded Christian men and women who did not allow the differences in their race nor ethnicity to come between the brotherhood and sisterhood of their shared faith. In this exhibit is the history of our very own university told by some of our alum who have since gone to their heavenly homes. I have been privileged to collect photographs, artifacts, and incredible stories as well. In this rare exhibit, you will see a representation of the culmination of over 10 years of research from the archives of individuals and from our university and also our local mission churches. Please join us inside the Hugh and Hazel Darling Library to view the hidden story of the missions of Americans of Japanese ancestry, which is our collective story. The title of our exhibit is Imago Day, Americans of Japanese Ancestry Experience. Imago Day means image of God. This is a little-known American history of a quiet population of dedicated brothers and sisters in Christ. They served with a common faith and a common unity across the racial divide of the times. Mission-minded missionaries of different races and ethnicities were unified and brought glory to God by serving one another with a faith that was stronger than the circumstances of popular opinion, war, and any racial divide. The testimony of these consecrated lives continue to speak to us today. This is an oil painting that was painted by Shozo Sasuga, who was my grandfather, and he painted it around 1954 or around that period of time. The picture that is depicted, I was told, was high noon, and family members described to me that the two ducks represented a husband and a wife traveling across the ocean to a new land. This is a gravestone rubbing from the Evergreen Cemetery in Los Angeles, the oldest cemetery in the Los Angeles area. Japanese Americans were not allowed to be buried in certain cemeteries. This poem below was written by Shimazu around 1960 or 1970. The poem, loosely translated, is, "Husband and wife come to America, and they live out their life, and now they finally become part of America, the earth, the ground, the soil of America." There are 8 stations in this exhibit, and this is station number 1. In 1868, the Meiji Era began in Japan, marking the beginning of a country opening its doors to the West. People from all walks of life started coming to the United States from Japan. The first missions work began between 1877 and 1899, with 10 mission churches on the West Coast in California, Oregon, and Washington. The major role of the missions was to assist in the successful and healthy spiritual, economic, civic, and social cultural adjustment of Japanese American pioneers. This Bible belonged to Reverend Nakamura from the Wintersburg Church. It is a turn-of-the-century Victorian-era Bible written in Japanese. This Bible opens traditionally Japanese style from the back to the front. There are 3 basic generations which are included in this particular exhibit. Although we're only covering 3 generations, during the present day we have approximately 6 generations of Japanese Americans here in the United States. The first generation was called Issei. The second was Nisei, and the third was Sansei. This picture depicts the Issei who built the missions as the central hub of their community. In one of the historical books written by one of our pastors, It states that the history of the Japanese in America run parallel to the history of its missions. Without the history of the Japanese American missions, the full history of Japanese American stories and the American story of the autonomy of a people will be incomplete. The Nisei was the second generation. They were American-born citizens. And this is John Shimazu, who was Nisei. He was born in 1919. Very typical birthday for our older Japanese American Nisei. And Mary Otani, this picture was taken in 1922, and she was a member of one of our Free Methodist churches. This picture here is a class picture from Pacific Bible College. In the middle of the picture is President Cornelius Haggard. And if you notice, there are two class leaders, very small class, two class leaders, Victor Fujiyu and Teruko Hashimoto, who are right here. Our second station is the Exclusionary Period station from 1907 to 1942. Efforts were made by special interest groups, for example, farmers and politicians, to create a discriminatory legislation. This legislation prevented Issei, the first generation, who were legal immigrants, from owning property, prevented American-born Nisei from attending public schools, and prohibited Japanese immigrants from becoming naturalized citizens, regardless of their collective model behavior, productivity, or their length of time as legal residents. Many waited for over 40 years for the United States government to recognize them, yet they were not allowed to apply for naturalized citizenship due to a single factor of their race and ethnicity alone. In this picture, Victor Fujiyu on the right, alum of Pacific Bible College, was song leader for his graduating class before he was sent to camp. During this discriminatory period, missionary-minded friends, LAPC, and Pacific Bible College administrators provided tangible support and an atmosphere of brotherhood. On February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt issued an executive order that sent all persons of Japanese ancestry to concentration camps in desolate areas throughout the United States. Each family was given a number. Demeaning number tags were placed on all persons as well as their luggage. Families and individuals lost property, such as farms, automobiles, equipment, crops, etc. Some of these businesses had taken 30 to 40 years to establish. Here's a statement from Kmurakami, who was 10 years old. I remember on the afternoon of December 7th, 1941, a Sunday, hearing the honking of cars and hearing on the radio the devastating news that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. War had broken out, and I was afraid, not knowing what this could mean for our family and our Japanese friends. I remember crying at school and being comforted. I did not want to leave my friends. Mrs. Evelyn Dillon, our teacher, was sad that all the Japanese Americans were ordered to evacuate the West Coast. On the last day of school, she let my classmates walk me home from school. And again, this is from Kmurakami, Evergreen Baptist Church, in the book Triumphs of Faith. The fourth station is the concentration camp period from 1942 to approximately 1945. To this day, families of succeeding generations continue to feel the effects of the incarceration and evacuation, which had severe impact on health, education, psychological well-being, and the loss of civil liberties. Reverend and Mrs. Herbert Nicholson, The good Reverend was a Quaker missionary friend to persons in the camps. His wife was a Methodist. Reverend Nicholson made many regular trips to the camps with supplies for those held in the camps. And here's a picture right here that was painted by a Japanese American artist in the camps of Reverend Nicholson visiting the camps with his truck filled with supplies for the Japanese American people. There were people who cared, such as Dr. Cornelius Haggard, president of Pacific Bible College, who visited the camps and encouraged Nisei students who were his contemporaries and friends. As a gesture of appreciation and friendship for his support, compassion, and kindness, the Nisei students presented him with a Madonna, which was carved out of the ironwood found in the desolate areas surrounding the camp. This is station number 5, and we call this one Ministry in the Camps. Young Nisei ministers attempted to keep things as normal as possible and even conducted weddings and funerals within the camps. They held worship services, sang hymns, held Sunday school classes for children, and prayer meetings to keep up the morale. In this photograph, you can see that they were having a revival meeting right in the middle of camp. Nisei soldiers of World War II. Segregated. Nikkei American heroes served in a segregated military unit, commonly known as Go for Broke Regiment. The 100th 442nd is the most highly decorated unit for its size and length of service in U.S. military history. President Harry Truman said, "You fought not only the enemy, you fought prejudice, and you won." Among the many awards and distinctions earned through the bravery and sacrifice of these units are 7 Presidential Unit citations, 21 Medals of Honor, 29 Distinguished Service Crosses, 560 Silver Stars with 28 oak leaf clusters, 22 Legion of Merit medals, 15 Soldiers medals, 4,000 Bronze Stars, and more than 4,000 Purple Hearts. The Congressional Gold Medal. The 100th and 442nd Regimental Unit and the MIS Military Intelligence Service were recipients of the Congressional Gold Medal in 2011 at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. The Congressional Gold Medal is the highest civilian award in the United States. It is awarded to an individual or unit who performs an outstanding deed or act of service to the country for the security, prosperity, and national interest of the United States. This is a picture of my mom, Nellie A. Sasuga Shimazu. She was a Women's Army Corps sergeant. What would have marked the celebration of Nellie's graduating year of high school and entrance into college was instead marked by an unexpected evacuation. She, along with her family, were evacuated into the temporary housing in the Santa Anita racetrack horse stalls. Then later, she and her parents and siblings were assigned to housing in Poston 2-7-B concentration camp in Arizona. She was the 6th young Nisei woman from Poston to join the WAC. She wanted to show that she was a loyal American. She proudly served as a sergeant in the Women's Army Corps. The frame of the picture was constructed by her father, who before World War II worked for a Jewish-owned company, the Rexall Owl Drugstore. Nisei soldiers served in the U.S. military while their families were incarcerated behind barbed wire. If you notice in the picture, the flag is at half-mast. Flags in the camps fly at half-mast in this picture. for the sons, grandsons, siblings, spouses, and parents who lost their lives serving in the United States Army while their families were incarcerated. This is the 7th station on resettlement, the period of time when people returned from camp from 1945 to 1947. This is on East Campus, where currently the Ronald Building is located. And this is where they had the 16th Annual Conference of the Pacific Coast Japanese Free Methodist Conference in 1947. Alum and members of the Pacific Coast Japanese Free Methodist Conference returned from their 3 to 5 year exiles in the desolate concentration camps and outside areas. Including in the photo front center is then President Dr. Cornelius Haggard, along with Reverend and Mrs. Burnett, Free Methodist minister, and his wife. And they are seated front center next to Reverend Frank Omi and his wife. Dr. Haggard and the Burnetts supported the Free Methodist Conference before, during the camps, and after the mass evacuation. LAPC Free Methodists, Dr. Haggard, and Pacific Bible College allowed some to live temporarily on campus in uncertain times. This is a photo of the Evergreen Church pastors, Reverend Kota on the left, along with Pastor Arnold Nakajima on the right. It was taken at the first Easter at the Evergreen Hostel after exiting camp. The Friends, or the Quakers, helped the Union Church to form this hostel in East Los Angeles, where many people stayed after they exited camp, having no place to stay. It was like a huge hotel that helped people to find jobs, to locate housing, and to just support people until they got back on their feet. Arnold Nakajima was an alum of Pacific Bible College and a Nisei Honorary degree recipient, and he stayed to help manage the Evergreen Hostel during the post-war settlement period with Reverend Kota. This is station number 8, Mission Churches, a Model for Unity, 1952 to the present. And why did we start in 1952? That was the year that Japanese Americans were granted the ability to become naturalized citizens. So my grandmother, who came near the turn of the century, the last century, in her old age, was able to become a naturalized citizen. And I remember the day she came and showed me her certificate. She knelt down, because I was very tiny at the time, and she held up that certificate, and that was the first time I had ever seen tears in my grandmother's eyes. Today, most of our original founding American Christian mission churches, serving Christians of Japanese ancestry, have flourished and operated across multiple denominations. All of these churches have already celebrated their 100-year anniversaries, or will soon be celebrating their 100th-year anniversaries.
This exhibit is a tribute to our God, who brought our former student alum and founders of the Japanese Evangelical Missionary Society and the Federation of Japanese Churches through the fire of undeserved mistreatment and long-suffering. It is also dedicated to those alum and others who have gone before us and were our parents, grandparents, leaders, spouses, and friends. We thank you for your steadfastness and leadership in times of turmoil. To the American Friends Service and to the many missionaries and mission-minded Christian friends, such as the Bodenhammers, the Burnetts, the Nicholsons, Dr. Haggard, Reverend Mayberry, Maud Thornton, and others who stood by us on American and godly principles when it was unpopular. We thank God for you and your loyal friendships of faith. We are forever grateful and look forward to that day of great reunion.